bye to those people who joined us from the Google Hangout. Bye, guys. Kate, over to you.
Okay, well done, guys. Terrific, huh? Sure. Okay, second plenary session, right? So I'm hoping some of you are managing to get the Wi-Fi, big overload there. Some of you are just direct on your phones. Everybody know on Wi-Fi at the moment? Oh, Ennis, David Ball, somebody, the back, can you let Ennis know we need capacity, please? Hashtag equality.
Yeah, no, he's...
No, I meant that. This plenary is about perhaps the biggest challenge of them all. Very high vote on the selection for topics, yeah? A huge entry for speakers, okay? But you particularly, in your caucuses and discussions with us online, wanted to have a very particular focus for this session on gender equality, which I think is so interesting the way it follows on from so many of the comments that were made in the plenary session on education. How can rhetoric be turned into reality? Okay, so you know that the news on gender equality is absolutely not good. Women's rights are routinely violated on a daily basis and in many countries, not just the obvious suspects. Sometimes it's casual, sometimes it's career-based, sometimes it's poverty. But very, very often in the last year, it's been violence. In the World Health Organization multi-country study found that between 15 and 71% of women aged 15 to 49 reported physical and or sexual violence by a partner at some point in their lives. In the 21st century, violence is causing more death and disability worldwide amongst women between ages 15 to 44 than war, cancer, malaria, and traffic accidents. I did not know that. This is a terrible statistic. To the men in the audience, and I'm not looking at any of you, that violence is being perpetrated by men. And the grim statistics continue. 2/3 of all the illiterate adults in the world are women. We make up just 17% of parliamentarians, okay? Among the FTSE 100 companies, 3 women CEOs. But when we polled you, the generation that we believe counts, 88% of you said that upholding women's rights wasn't just about progress on the gender front, but a clear sense that progress would result in much greater far-reaching benefits as societies reframed themselves. So while this session is focused on how to address the structural causes of gender inequality, make no mistake, it is also about the universal nature of human rights and the role that they play in making the world a better place. So the delegate speakers for this session are extremely special, courageous young people. Some of their stories are going to shock you, but don't just sit there shocked. You're supposed to be shocked into action. That's what we're here for, to change what is unacceptable. So, I'm going to start introducing the councillors. So, a champion of human rights, a man who never takes no for an answer. Yes, he's a rock star, but he's one of the world's great orators, and I think we can now, One Young World, we can say he's our very own Sir Bob Geldof. Bob. Okay, and a councillor you met last night, Fatima Bhutto, seen so many members of her family killed and has emerged as one of that region and the world's most powerful, articulate, eloquent voices for peace. Fatima Bhutto. Fatty. A huge force in European current affairs, France's doyen of news television, the first woman to anchor French news and a correspondent now for the BBC as well. From France, Christine Ockrent. known for her courageous determination to talk about really difficult subjects and confront them head-on, a voice that is listened to by millions every morning in Kenya on radio, Kaierouann Mutoko. This next councillor was head of worldwide advertising at HSBC Global before becoming a famous independent filmmaker, applauded and awarded at Cannes, the Sundance and the Berlin International Film Festivals, Maya Sanbar Jamo. Okay, so now, as I said to you, I was telling you this morning, we had almost 1,000 speech applications for the 36 delegate speaker places. So it was a really big process to go through, find the stuff and find the people that are really taking action and showing us amazing things. And human rights was easily the biggest of those. Or you can be like these guys, Bob, and say, what are you going to do about it? So, will you welcome the delegate speakers? Delegate speakers on stage, please. Fatty, will you introduce the first speaker? Sorry, Christine.
Yes, I think it's up to me to introduce the first speaker.
Are you first? I do beg your pardon.
No, I mean, I don't want, I mean, Fatima will be next, of course. Kate, you gave us these staggering figures just a while ago, this terrible data about violence against women. It's now my privilege to introduce to you Amanda Dufresne. Dufresne is a lovely French name, but she's actually an American. She's a genius in math, which I personally find very impressive. She works for Google in Colorado, and she went through a terrible, violent, personal experience, and she has found the resource to talk about it, to talk to you about it. She is speaking out against rape. Please welcome Amanda Dufresne.
Ten years ago, I was training for my first half marathon when I was attacked, beaten, and raped. I narrowly escaped with my life by rolling myself over a small cliff and running half-clothed to safety. That was the easy part. I spent the next 3 years undergoing intense counseling and brain therapy from the damages caused by the attack. I was an insomniac for 2 years. My grades suffered for the first time in my life. Because of the psychological trauma, I wasn't able to run again for 9 years. I'll come back to that part later. I even attempted suicide just to try to end the pain. Rape is the most brutal of crimes. It attacks the body, the mind, and the soul. It is a clear violation of basic human rights. My older sister flew out to attend my appointments with doctors and detectives. My parents ensured I had the best care to heal me. And when insurance wouldn't pay for them, my dad cashed out retirement accounts to pay for treatments. My mom drove me an hour each way to brain therapy multiple times a week. My younger sister was my biggest fan. I'm so lucky to have the family I have to help me get through this. Not everyone has this. Lately, you hear about rape in the media a lot. Not one, but 2 separate incidents involving 5-year-old girls in India, raped and murdered. A 14-year-old girl in the US and a 16-year-old in Canada were raped, had their attacks published online, and committed suicide. A student in Brazil riding a bus home, gang raped. Rape is happening every day in every one of our countries. We are all disgusted and shocked when we hear those stories. Yet we don't talk about rape, and by not doing so, we silently condone it. Rape is a silent epidemic. Statistics internationally are very hard to come by because women don't report their rapes. In fact, in some countries, you can be jailed for reporting rape. And in most countries, you and your family are shamed into silence. In the United States recently, statistics show up to 1 in 5 women will be raped in their lifetime. I can confidently say every one of you in this room knows someone who has survived rape. And some of you here are also survivors. We are a gathering of leaders from 190 nations. We must start the conversation about rape. Just the word rape is uncomfortable. It doesn't seem polite. But we must talk about rape. I want the conversation to start today. This is an international epidemic, and rape is being used as a weapon against women. We need to talk to young boys about respecting girls' minds, bodies, and souls, to treat them as equals. We need to teach them violence against women is never okay. They need to know that rape is the most horrendous of crimes and destroys women's lives. If we don't talk about this, boys won't report it or try to stop it. We need to talk to our young women about respecting themselves, that if they or someone they know is raped, it is not okay. They must come forward to get the help they need and end this disgusting cycle of violence. When we start talking about rape, we can give women the resources they need to recover and thrive again. We must talk about rape. 2 months ago, I celebrated 10 years of survival from my rape. I celebrated by running the half marathon I had been training for when I was attacked. Thank you. At the beginning of the speech, I told you running had become physically impossible for me. I'd run for a minute, I'd get physically ill because I felt like someone was following me. But 1 minute at a time, 1 mile at a time, and with a lot of help from family and dear friends, I finished 13.1 miles. And I wanted to help other women too. So I raised over $19,000 for the nonprofit Speaking Out About Rape. The money will enable more women to get the help they need to recover. I was so lucky I survived. I was so lucky to have access to the resources I needed to recover. Not many women have that because the resources are not available, because they cannot talk about it, and because we don't talk about rape. I started the conversation today. I was raped. I said that awful word, rape, 27 times. I challenge you to talk about rape once today, once when you get back home, and keep talking about it. We must make this world safer for our women and our young girls. We must talk about rape. Thank you.
Well, I spent a little bit of time with Amanda yesterday, and she's not only incredibly brave, but she's one of the nicest people I've ever met. So thank you, Amanda, for sharing with us. Now I'd like to introduce the delegate speaker from Guyana, the very impressive Imarah Radix. All of 27 years old, Imarah has worked tirelessly to build outreach activities to communities across Guyana, to build a zero tolerance for domestic violence. In this capacity, she has traveled with the Ministry of Health and Human Services Men's Affairs Bureau. I didn't know what a Men's Affairs Bureau was either, but I'm now convinced every country needs one. And you can ask her a bit more about that in the Q&A. Imarah has an impressive resume, so I'm just going to tell you really quick what's on it. She was the first woman from Guyana to intern at the UN Resident Coordinator's Office in Georgetown. She, in February, organized the largest public event in the Caribbean advocating for gender equality and an end to violence against women and LGBT groups. She, last month, won a UN Peace Award for her work in community development. She is... Very well, yes. But there's so much more. She's a global shaper with the World Economic Forum. Yeah. A Miss Guyana World. And it's not only against domestic violence towards women and LGBT groups that she works. She's also very interested in food security and is currently working to establish a mushroom farm that will double as a women's cooperative and shelter where women can feed their families, can learn skills, can be educated, and can pass on what they know to their community. And this is going to be called the Pink Mushroom Farm, right? Please give a warm welcome to Imarah.
Good afternoon, One Young World Counsellors, fellow panelists, and delegates. I'm truly honored today to be the only delegate speaker from the Caribbean. I represent Guyana, which is well known for the majestic Kaierouann Falls, pristine rainforests, and the warmth and ethnic diversity of our people. Despite all these charms, there is stark inequality and a deep-seated racial divide which was entrenched by colonialism. There is an endemic culture of violence and disrespect, with daily cases of discrimination involving sexual orientation, domestic violence, rape, murder, and human trafficking, as there are in many parts of the world. Women in my country are chopped to death with cutlasses and burnt with acid and kerosene by their partners. Some are abused for seeking an education, not preparing meals on time, going out without permission, or refusing to have sex. The police send women home to their abusers, believing that the women deserve it. We are struggling to address the fundamental question of how to affect the kind of societal change needed to eliminate domestic violence in Guyana. This change can only occur through a multi-sectoral approach and with sustained political will necessary to implement a long-term and coherent plan of action similar to the HIV/AIDS response. We need to quantify the economic and social costs of violence to change the way society understands and views violence. In the Greater Georgetown area, 1 in 5 women had suffered physical and verbal abuse. 1 in 10 suffered sexual abuse. Over 50% of women in an abusive relationship had experienced psychological symptoms of depression and anxiety. More than 65% had no knowledge of the Domestic Violence Act. This was especially the case for 77.3% of Indo-Guyanese women. One solution to gender inequality is for more women to become entrepreneurs, to take control of their earning power and branch out into male-dominated sectors. We have the power to transform the status quo. However, to do that, we need greater decision-making powers, equal pay, and access to opportunities at all levels of society. In this regard, I have set out to build a mushroom farm and a women's shelter. This facility would provide women with employment and education so that they could learn new skills and sustain the shelter. They can return to their communities, feed their families, and teach others. Investing in women's empowerment sets us on a direct path towards inclusive economic growth, gender equity, and poverty alleviation. Having been a victim of a vicious attack whilst at university, I am wholly dedicated to seeking justice for survivors of violence. I'm also personally involved in starting a Holla Back campaign, encouraging women to work together to end street harassment, ignite public conversations, and develop innovative strategies to tackle this issue. I have worked tirelessly to raise awareness of LBT and women's rights, with other NGOs doing outreach in schools across the country. Because being gay is illegal not only in Guyana, but in the entire English-speaking Caribbean, we are calling on government to repeal the discriminatory laws against loitering and gross indecency, which are arbitrarily invoked to discriminate against LGBT minorities and often leads to human rights violations perpetrated by the police. This year, on February 14th, I was responsible for organizing 1 Billion Rise in Guyana, the largest public event held in the Caribbean region against violence and gender inequality. In 2014, the theme is justice. We're calling for justice for all victims of human rights violations on the international stage. We must take action now at a grassroots level in our communities through the use of social media, awareness campaigns, and projects to promote human rights and gender equality. The older generations in some countries do not see the need to change the ingrained social, cultural, and religious attitudes of subservience that women have been taught, believing that beating equals love. It is up to us to bring the older and younger generations together, because gender inequality undermines everyone's development. Together, we can break down the wall of gender inequality for women everywhere. I challenge you to take action. End street harassment, end violence, use social media to host discussions with youth, civil society leaders, and NGOs. This task is not too great. We are the generation that will stop the brutality. I thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm here to introduce an exceptional young man to you. His name is Mohammad Almunaikh. He is from Kuwait, and he has arduously campaigned for women's rights in Kuwait, leading to their right to vote that was finally accepted in 2005. And since then, women have been extremely active in Kuwaiti society. And he tells me that there are 9 delegates here today from Kuwait, 7 of whom are actually women. So that's great. So once that was achieved, he decided that there was not enough transparency in the Kuwaiti government. So he went to the Emir and said, I would like to go and visit the country and speak to young people and see what the issues are and come back to you with a report and say, and explain how we can make this a more transparent and equalitarian country. So having done that, he came back to the Emir with his report, and thanks to his findings, he has been able to create a ministry of youth in Kuwait. And that is a wonderful achievement. So he's going to talk to you about all of that. So please welcome Mohammad.
I thought I'm tall. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. I am delighted to discuss a topic that I am keen on and that represents the story of a nation awakening. As you may know, Kuwait is only 50 years young in terms of democracy, but we have made significant advancement in a short period of time. We started by writing our constitution in 1962 that promotes equality, freedom of speech, and protect individual human rights. However, women were prevented from voting and participating in politics, even though their right to vote was embedded in the constitution. Ms. Nouriya Saddani, a Kuwaiti citizen, felt unrepresented in her country. And in 1971, she appealed to the parliament, but she was unsuccessful. A member of parliament took notice of her action, and he took a stand to rectify the situation, but he was also unsuccessful. Since then, 10 individuals, including the Emir himself, stood up for women voices to be heard, but to no avail. Also, university students refused to remain silent. They established a student union called Democratic Circle in 1974, which I joined later, to take a stand and correct the situation by increasing awareness among students through inviting activists, parliament members, and government officials to our campus for seminars and debates to raise our point of view. We hoped that by the time the students are old enough, they would vote or influence others to vote in favor of human rights. And 34 years later, activist group, government parliament member and voters took a stand together for women's right to vote. And on May 16, 2005, we succeeded. And finally, Ms. Nouriya Saddani voted. Today, Kuwait is privileged to have 6 women in the parliament. My stand for humanitarian rights continues. Last year, we had a national youth project, an initiative by the Emir of Kuwait to form a bridge between himself and the youth of the country. And I was selected to become a member of the National Youth Project. It was an opportunity for us to discuss our priorities and challenges. One of the main issues was social security and integration. We were concerned about how our society was divided based on religion, ethnicity, and even geography. Once again, the law was ineffective. It failed to protect our rights against wasta and hate speech. Wasta is the practice of discrimination and corruption. We discovered through a survey we conducted and from the parliamentary election results. Worse, voters were favoring candidates with bias to their own religious and ethnic background. Worse, the survey showed that 40% of youth believed a new law would not be able to ensure fair treatment and address these human rights issues. Therefore, through the National Youth Project, we took a stand. We decided to be part of the solution rather than magnifying the problem through just complaining. And we started our awareness campaign consisting of 1, petitioning against hate speech, which resulted in a 10,000 signature. 2, promoting equality and discouraging wasta through directing a play in one of the biggest shopping malls in Kuwait. As of today, this video has over 160,000 hits on YouTube. 3, sponsoring a volunteer program for teenagers called Spread the Passion, designed to integrate the different parts of our society. By being very direct and transparent with the Emir about our concern, today the National Youth Project has become an official government ministry. dedicated to youth, dedicated to youth affairs. Today, we are all here to take a stand as delegate and ambassador to make our voices heard. Remember, the law is not always enough to protect the human rights. Ms. Nouria's rights were embedded in an ineffective law, and it took 34 years of campaigning before she could exercise that right. So all of you here in this room, when you see injustice, take a stand. Take a stand together and keep going forward, no matter how long it takes, because the world is our responsibility. In Kuwait, Ms. Nouria took a stand for her human rights, and it took 34 years, but she voted. Let's not allow another 34 years to pass by. Take a stand today. Thank you.
Promoting women's rights in your community, in your country, however different your culture may be, means, of course, as we've heard from Amanda, fighting against violence, promoting the right for women to vote, but also giving women access to leadership, particularly in business. And this is the cause which Sally Hasler has decided she would work for. Sally is Australian. She's had an experience with government in Australia. She lives in Hong Kong, and she works for an organization called the Women's Foundation, the purpose of which is to increase the number of women in boards, in business. So tell us how you proceed and what your successes have been. Sally Hasler.
Hi everyone. Today I'd like to talk to you about gender equality in the workplace and the role that business can play to boost women's workforce participation in a world desperate for economic growth. My life experience is from Australia and Hong Kong, where on the whole, basic human rights are protected by law and are upheld. But gender inequality still exists throughout society, especially during women's professional careers. Today, women can still expect 17.5% less pay in Australia, 20% less in Hong Kong. Second, to experience some form of sexual harassment or discrimination. Over 20% of women in Australia, 30 to 40% in the Asia Pacific. Third, to be overlooked for promotions or opportunities because of subtle gender bias about leadership aptitude. And fourth, to take a career break or a less ambitious job because affordable childcare isn't readily available in Australia, or because of traditional cultural expectations in Hong Kong, where 25% of women stop working when they get married. And for too long, women have been trying to fix this themselves by working harder to balance work and home life, undertake extra training, and battle through the glass ceiling. If we are really serious about creating a more fair and productive future for young women, we need to stop fixing the women and start working on the men. I believe big business and the men who run them have significant power to change outcomes for women around the world. Companies like GE operate in 130 countries. Citi operates in 160. That's 160 opportunities to support gender equality. Whatever the economic, socio-political and cultural differences in these countries, and they will be vast, businesses have the opportunity and the duty to ensure equality for women. And they should want to. Gender equality is an economic imperative, Research shows it improves company performance. Investors link it with a higher return on investment. The IMF estimates that the global economy misses out on 27% of GDP growth per capita due to the gender gap in the labour market. In any business, 50% underutilisation of a resource would be considered an unsustainable waste. At the Women's Foundation, I lead a program to boost the demand for and the supply of women on Hong Kong's boards and advise companies on strategies to attract and retain women. Our 30% club consists of 55 chairmen advocating for more women in boardrooms. They champion and catalyse efforts to build a pipeline of women executives. It is much more powerful to have men advocate for gender equality. So we need more male champions like Warren Buffett and Paul Polman and Mohammad. We need to educate leaders on the case for greater female participation. We need to challenge gender bias, stereotypes and traditional views. And we need to reframe the way we think about women and working and stop placing limitations on their desires and abilities to pursue ambitious, successful careers. And we need new solutions. Firstly, we can't have equality in the workplace until we have equality at home. Businesses should adapt to more innovative parental leave models that encourage active fathering and tackle the stigma of parental leave to support men and women to return to work and to care for children. Businesses can help families access affordable quality childcare. In many countries, this is the difference between women working or not. They can fund childcare, help find places, or even build adjoining childcare centres. Businesses should measure gender inequality in their organisation, set targets, and evaluate managers on meeting those targets. What gets measured gets done. Business leaders should seek out and sponsor female talent and recruit others to do the same. Men often have top-level sponsors who advocate for them and open doors, whereas women often have mentors who provide advice and support. If every powerful man in this world pulled one woman up with him, the number of female leaders would rise rapidly. And businesses should share best practice, debate solutions, and learn from one another. The battle for gender equality is not restricted to one country. It is a global battle. Businesses operating globally have the ability to lift women's workforce participation, supporting human rights and much-needed economic growth. The developed world has a responsibility to live the values it promotes to the developing world. If it stalls on gender equality, I worry the rest of the world will as well. So go home and challenge your companies. How are they supporting women in the workplace, both at home and abroad, and what can they do better? Thank you.
The lady I'm about to introduce has decided to take on the great unspoken. Being from media, there are certain things we report on page 32 because putting it on page 1 or 2 is uncomfortable. And I had to speak to her because I told her, why are you taking on this monster? Human trafficking for a lot of us seems to sound ancient, alien. Actually, there are people who don't believe it happens. But being from Kenya, I know it does. And it affects women across the board from the age of 10 to 45, 50. Emily Reeves is passionate about creating maximum social impact through a word I love, effective philanthropy. She's also particularly interested in creative communication because I know traditional communication doesn't work anymore. And she's very creative in how she wants to handle the PR and the public affairs to highlight social injustice. She's a campaign developer and trustee for the Red Light Campaign. It's a charity of 6 student volunteers working to raise awareness about the great unspoken, human trafficking, a global multi-million-pound industry. It is only second to drugs. Only second to drugs. Human trafficking is modern-day slavery. Emily Reeves has come up with a CUBE movement. I refuse to describe what it is because I do believe she'll do a better job than me any day. Ladies, gentlemen, One Young World, Emily Reeves.
Thank you very much. We are all part of a common humanity. We all believe in the values of dignity and basic human rights. Human trafficking is a fundamental violation of these human rights. It transcends all racial, religious, cultural, and national boundaries. It is an attack on the very core of what it means to be human. It is impossible to watch in silence or ignore. The illicit human trafficking industry is estimated to be worth around $32 billion. Although predominantly women, the industry also involves children and men across every country in our world. It is also one of the main engines of the global AIDS epidemic. There is much work to be done. Only 46,000 victims of an estimated 27 million have been brought to light worldwide. The illegal acquisition of human beings for commercial sex and labor is modern-day slavery. There are more slaves today than in the entire 400 years of the transatlantic slave trade. These slaves live with fear, deception, threats, coercion, intimidation, force, and exploitation. The Syrian crisis is of huge concern, with roughly 2 million refugees across the region. A UN representative in Jordan voiced his concern that 500,000 Syrian refugees in his country alone are targets for underage marriage, prostitution, and rape due to their vulnerability and desperation. Among these casualties is an 18-year-old Syrian who arrived in a Jordanian camp last summer. Her father married her off for just $1,000 US, and her husband then handed her over to a brothel. Her parents left to go back to Syria in January, and now she is alone. How many thousands of others who share a similar story is unknown. In Jordan, prostitution is illegal. Those caught face up to 3 years in jail or deportation. The government is urging anybody affected by exploitation to report it to the authorities. But what choice do these women have with no protection and no money? Elimination of human trafficking requires multiple actors on an international scale. I work as a campaign developer for the Red Light Campaign, a charity fighting human trafficking and modern-day slavery. We use innovative ways to raise awareness and understanding of how large this issue is. I'm incredibly proud to announce that the Red Light Campaign will launch a unique initiative in the British Parliament this November. This is called the Cube Movement, and this is our Cube. The Cube Movement will be the first ever social network to fight modern-day slavery. It will enable people to physically and digitally pass on reliable information about slavery. The Cube Movement uses chains of communication to fight against the chain of human trafficking. Each cube has an individual tracking ID. As the cube is passed from one person to the next, this journey across the world is mapped out on social media and on our website. It provides a powerful illustration of the growing global awareness of this issue. The Red Light Campaign is also establishing communication between the public and private sectors to fund and create rehabilitation and aftercare programs for these survivors. Many of these survivors lack basic skills and qualifications. Working with victim shelters, we will help survivors reintegrate into society through funds raised by the Cube Movement. We will fund their education, enable them to receive English lessons, create CVs, and so gain access to the job market. We are in the process of establishing work placement programs in the private sector. Human trafficking is the fastest growing form of international crime and the second largest source of income next to the drugs trade. And yet, the punishment for trafficking humans remains lower than that for trafficking drugs. The United Nations states that this is a crime of such magnitude and atrocity that it cannot be dealt with successfully by any one government alone. Let us bring the issue of human trafficking into the global dialogue. I am only 22, and the Red Light Campaign is just a small team of 6 part-time volunteers, and yet we have orchestrated campaigns and hosted global events with partners such as the United Nations, the Tony Blair Faith Foundation, and the British Prime Minister David Cameron. Let us be the advocates for those without a voice. Let our generation restore the dignity for those who have had their lives torn apart. And let One Young World ambassadors be advocates for the freedom of the 27 million slaves. You can start today by asking me for a cube, following us online, following us on Twitter and on Facebook. In the words of William Wilberforce, who led the 26-year parliamentary campaign in the UK against the transatlantic slave trade, you may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again that you did not know. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As the only man on this panel, it's a little uncomfortable at the moment. Well done, Mohammad. I want to introduce you to, like everybody else over that side, an exceptional person. Ilwad Elman is a Somali. Her parents were human rights activists. I can't remember Somalia at any point where it wasn't a near tragedy or an actual tragedy. Her father was murdered for being a speaker for human rights in that benighted country. She was raised in the relative safety of Canada with her mother. And 4 years ago, at the height of the famine in Somalia and the drought which exacerbated the civil war there, remarkably, her mother and she decided to return to the centre of the storm. They decided they'd go to Mogadishu and take up the baton that her father had been forced to drop by his death. But they focused on one of the great abuses, as we've been hearing consistently throughout this session, of our time, the almost willful violence against women. It seems bizarre. Perhaps it was always as intense. Who knows? But one of the benefits of our age is that we now know that it happens all the time, everywhere, in many, many homes, that up till now it's been the quiet Holocaust. And it is quite right that Kate has decided always to dedicate this session on human rights to this foul abuse that needs to stop right now. And when you go back to your homes in your countries, you begin working with these people here who've done so much in such little time, such a young age, to stop it. Here's one of these people. When she returned to Somalia with her mother, she set up the first rape crisis centre. Now, can you imagine? The middle of an existential famine, of an existential civil war, this young woman and her mother returned to the city where their father was killed to set up a rape crisis centre called Sister Somalia. For the first time, they brought to the attention of people there the abuse of women, the violence that goes unchecked and unpunished, the consistent rape as if it was a right. Can you imagine the slap in the face to the thugs and the murderers of Al-Shabaab that she represents? And she will leave South Africa and return to that daily, parlous condition of being a woman and alive and speaking out in Mogadishu. I've rarely encountered such bravery. Ladies and gentlemen, Ilwad Elman.
Thank you very much. My name is Ilwad Elman, and I live and work in Mogadishu, Somalia, a country recently ranked as the second worst place in the world to be a woman. And this is because Somali women face several forms of gender-based violence: forced and early marriage, almost universal female genital mutilation, rape, and other forms of sexual violence. Women from the internally displaced peoples camps and the host community are systematically preyed upon. This is made worse by the vast number of small arms in civilian hands and a growing gang culture in some parts of the country. Acts of sexual violence usually go unpunished, and rapists are rarely tried or convicted. And even where justice is initiated, victims are not provided any form of protection, compensation, or recourse. Victims are treated like criminals, and those who dare seek justice are often retaliated against. In some cases, the rapists are even forced to marry their victims. My organization, Elman Peace and Human Rights Center, co-founded the first rape crisis center, called Sister Somalia. It was born during the most insecure of times, where the terrorist group Al-Shabaab controlled much of the country. Rape massacres, sexual slavery, genital mutilation, female infanticide, death by stoning, dowry murders, marital enslavement, beheadings, indiscriminate killings, and human trafficking were daily occurrences, often committed publicly, always left unspoken, where fear superseded all. Mentioning the word rape or providing services to survivors was so highly stigmatized, the only way to respond to the female suffering was through an underground network of support that Sister Somalia created through word of mouth. Survivors who were once supported by our center quickly began referring other women. Women who were raped months before, but until then were too afraid to seek aid, and others who were raped hours before all began coming forward. The 2011 famine in Somalia killed an estimated 260,000 people. This led to vast displacement and colossal displacement and vast influxes of internally displaced peoples, predominantly women with children in tow. They were all headed to Mogadishu, the nation's capital, in desperate search of food and aid. And when they arrived, they encountered even more insecurities. And their belief that Mogadishu was a safe haven for refuge and aid quickly became a very short-lived fallacy. The first Sister Somalia Center we set up used to receive a consistent at least 13 survivors of rape every day. The frantic calls of desperation arrived at all hours. The amount of women and girls seeking emergency care was overwhelming. And often, our offices even doubled up as shelters at night. All the while, my team and I faced threats and worked under enormous risks. Sexual violence is extremely taboo in Somalia. You have the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, the federal government, community leaders, and the general public. These different groups rarely have common views, but it became very, very clear that rape was a topic that they all wanted swept under the carpet. But Sister Somalia would not be silenced. It did the exact opposite. It changed the global discussion on sexual violence by bringing the issue to international platforms and giving the world a never seen or heard before candid look into the extent of the female suffering in Somalia. Although addressing gender-based violence remains an uphill battle, there have been some positive indicators. Gender-based violence is now a part of everyday language. However, to many, it still only means rape. And even in that, it does not include the more inhumane or unfathomable acts. The widely practiced female genital mutilation and domestic violence are considered necessary milestones in every woman's life. Some forms of gender-based violence are covered by patchworks of national law and international instruments the Somali government is considering ratifying, but the hard fact remains that no single instrument addresses gender-based violence in an unambiguous, comprehensive, legally binding manner. This is a chasm in the judicial system. I will continue to advocate for social and legislative reform to protect Somali women and girls because statistically, 1 in 3 women will be beaten or raped in her lifetime. 1 billion women are subjected to violence globally. If one believes in international law and the sanctity of human rights, then you must believe it's time for the violent oppression of women to end and to be addressed by international law as a class of crime in its own right through a convention on violence against women. And I call on all of you to lobby for this when you go back home. Women's security is not an option, but a fundamental prerequisite to progress. Thank you.
So, something that's in the midst of quite a lot of darkness there. Just want to make the point. You chose this topic. And half of you are men, so you chose this topic. This has to be a really, really good thing. So let's start here. These were really amazing contributions.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's go to the microphone. If we could ask councillors to go to the floor. Bob, you're a veteran at this. We need 4 councillors on the floor. Two mics. There's one here, one there.
2 mics there.
One there,
2.
one there. Okay, going to the mics. We will take 5, no more, at each mic. Volunteers, please step in behind the 5th person in the queue, and that will be the end of that queue.
That's what you want to go to the one at the back
Okay?
there, yeah.
Because otherwise you get upset when you can't get to the mic. 5 in each queue. If you're not in that part, if we get longer, we'll come back. But otherwise, I don't want you to get upset, okay? So, 5 in each queue. And then what we'll do is we ask the councillor to introduce you, your name and the country that you're from. And off we go, and we'll try to do it on time and bring the councillors back to the stage for closing comments if they wish. Christine, would you like to start us off?
Yes, with Aryo from Indonesia. What is the topic or the delegate you want to address your question to?
I would like to address about uneven and unbalanced adoption of gender equality, especially in developing countries. Thank you very much for the chance. I'm speaking here on behalf of developing countries such as Indonesia and other countries. Although that we are improving in the gender equality record, I must say that it is very uneven and imbalanced. It especially is only adopted in big cities. But if you go to remote areas, because right now I'm working at a social business that's trying to promote encouragement for people, especially in freedom of expressions, I've seen a lot of cases in remote areas where wives is still unable to go to a higher education just because her husband is telling her to do so, or even little children that is not being banned from school, not by her father or by her family relative, which is man, but from her mother. So it's a very structural gender inequality happens in remote areas. We think that it's a very huge problem. But at the same time, these people, the person that's trying to ban this little girl and woman to go to higher education is actually are also the same people that agrees with the constitution that everyone should be equal. So therefore, here I think that the work is not yet done until we can finally get this across the whole nations. I mean, I understand that Indonesia is a very big nation, 15,000 islands. But I think that this also happens outside of Indonesia. I really think that just because that it is not written, just because it is written in your constitution or even your law, it doesn't necessarily mean it is adopted universally. So just keep fixing and just keep searching for inequality. Thank you.
And If you can keep the answers short, we have 20 minutes. That's enough for 1 minute per person. But if we do 3 minutes per person, we don't have 20 minutes.
Bob?
This is Adriana Mateo from the United States. She wants to talk on human trafficking.
Hello. My name is Adriana Mateo. I'm a musician. I am a violinist and singer who performs with DJ Spooky, and I'm also here as a representative of the World Peace Orchestra. On the topic of human sex trafficking, so many of the women, the children, male and female, enter sex trafficking because they themselves come from abusive family environments that kind of conditions them to accept abusive environments. I was lucky. I came from a psychologically, verbally, and physically abusive background. I found music as a way, as an outlet. So my question is, how do we bring people to more positive environments to help them find ways to respect themselves and ask for more? Because these ideas about sex trafficking and these quote-unquote gender norms are so deeply embedded in the culture that it's such a multidimensional problem. How do we stop that from its roots so we can prevent the entire cycle from happening? Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Andrea. Maya, with you.
I'd like to introduce Sekone here from South Africa. He's going to talk to us about inclusivity, equal rights for people of all abilities.
A very good afternoon to all the delegates. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lihlo Sekone is my surname. I stand to comment really to encourage us and also to challenge all of us as young leaders here. I stand for promoting and protecting the rights of people with disabilities. And I would like to say that we are not disabled, really. However, we find ourselves in disabling circumstances that leave us dealing with situations and challenges that, we have gathered here to address. Through collective effort, though, we can overcome these barriers. Remember that as we stand for our rights, what we will see 10 years from now will be a result of what we are going to build over the process of time. And I'd also like to say that since it is also our right to have access to education, to also be part of the developments that are taking place, we would not have met the Millennium Development Goals if we do not include people with disabilities. I thank you.
Thank you. Fatima?
We have Anand from Laos who has a question for everyone.
I personally think that women's rights is a significant tool and instrument to social development. But let me talk about gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender rights. Because when you talk about gender equality, please keep in mind that it does involve LGBT rights as well. These people can contribute to social and economic development enormously, but they are left out. So, I often heard leaders, not just my country, but any country, say that we can help each other achieve the goal and make our country a better place. But in reality, only some people can contribute and others not, because a simple reason, because they are different based on their sexual orientation, gender identity. So I want to ask the counselors or anyone that what are the best approaches to tackle these obstacles? Thank you.
Okay, so we've got 13 minutes and we've got 16 more people at the mic, so you really have to get a clip on. Okay, Christine?
Yes, with Savina from Erbil in Iraq.
Hello, everyone. I come from the part of the world where religions are killing each other only because they're different from each other, where ethnicities and nationalities of minorities are being abused, disrespected, and in the process of being vanished, only because they are different from the majority of nationality. And women are being raped and harassed. Now I'm in a process of taking an action to run a project called Accept the Different. And I want to start with primary schools, with high schools and universities. But my problem is that I could not find, since last year of One Young World that I attended, I've been looking for academic resources and materials, activities, and coaching, and to help me to construct my plan, my project accurately. In order to help our people to understand that in order to live together and share the land together doesn't mean that we all have to be one religion, we all have to be one nationality or one ethnicity. We are all different. We can share the authority. Doesn't mean they have to be men to share the authority. We have to respect each other and accept each other. So I would seek for anyone to approach me to give me any references or help.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Caroline, with you.
I'm going to try and actually help you along here. The two girls behind me are both from Turkey, but their issue is totally different. First is Denise, and her issue is media and our very loud silence on the issues. And the other is Cheyenne and also government's silence on the same. So, ladies.
Hello, I'm from Turkey. And in Turkey, the violence against women has increased by 45% just in 2013. And I believe that the main reason for this, the primary element that promotes the situation, is the media that chooses to look away and not cover the situations. So I want to ask what can be done to urge the media to conduct proper journalism and cover these issues and hopefully create a public opinion upon these issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. As a law student and as a young journalist, the question is really struggling. I'm really struggling with this question. How could we change the government's and the lawmakers' opinions about women's rights while the rapers in my country has been freed, saying that the girl might have had sex with her will? Or while my governors has been referring women, the terms woman and girl, looking their virginity. Thanks.
It's hard to even applaud.
I'm introducing Vigar from Azerbaijan. He's talking about eligibility issues.
Good day, One Young World. I want to say that every year thousands of young people are getting homeless and jobless just because of their gay, lesbian, bisexual or transgender. And financial sustainability of LGBT people are the second important issue after LGBT rights. And my question is that how we can solve and prevent such issues like LGBT unemployment, because these people are unemployed not because of their skills, just because of their sexuality. And we don't need to train them and to do something else. We just need to change attitude of employees, not employers. Thank you so much.
Good for you. Fatty?
We've got Derek from Nigeria who has a question about power and empowerment.
I started my research on youth and capacity development looking at Nigeria. And when I started my pre-fieldwork research, one of the people I interviewed asked me a question. Derek, what's the difference between looking and focusing? I didn't have an answer. But then again, I met with another activist who gave me the answer. And he said, when you're up there, that's in power, you have so many things. You get entangled with the development bees. That's the development business. But you are not focusing on the problems of the marginalized others, which includes women and youth and LGBTs. My question or challenge to youth is, you will get the power, but it's not about whether you will get the power. It's what will you do when you get the power. Abraham Lincoln said, every man can stand the test of adversity. But if you want to know the true test of a man, give him power. So everybody seated in this room is a young leader, and we will eventually get to the place of authority. But when you get there, look back. Thank you.
Good advice. Christine.
Diane from Canada. Short.
Yes, hello everyone. So in addition to being an undergraduate student, I completed a pilot's license in 2011, and this July, after 2 years, became the first woman to fly the Supermarine Spitfire, Britain's World War II fighter aircraft. Thank you. in Chichester, West Sussex. Now, while equal access to opportunities may be the beginning, I would like to know how we can create a supportive, if not equal, environment for women to complete their goals. I have a friend who at the end of this year will be completing a degree in developmental genetics after years of discouragement to drop out simply because she was a woman. Becoming a pilot was not a smooth road either, and I encountered this same isolation continually. And as such, I would like to know how we can provide more than just the opportunity, but also the accountability of women's progress towards their dreams.
Bob.
This is Simo from South Africa. He's going to talk about how can men help to learn what women require and how to get there.
Thank you very much, Bob. I have a question for the delegate speakers that have addressed us here. That when we talk about issues of women's rights and the abuse of women, we tend to listen as men and as society as a whole, but there isn't a call to action among men to raise up and do something in relation to the challenges that women face. So what I would like to hear from you as women is, what is it that you think that men can do to make sure that we address issues of violence against women, human trafficking, and all of these things that you've talked about, so that by the time we move out of this gathering here, all of us as men make a declaration that we are all gender activists. The abuse of women concerns us all, and we are going to rally the world to say, if it happens, not in our name as men. So that's what I would like to do.
I'd like to introduce Mutoko from Indonesia, speaking about how women can help each other around the world.
Thank you very much. I will make it straight. In today's women's discussions, are we meant to give a special treatment to the woman itself? If so, if we give the special treatment to women, doesn't it will make the stigma that women actually cannot work on their own feet and they are actually very weak, if so? And why didn't that all the feminist movement actually happen in many countries? And why don't we have this kind of one young world that they have their one women that they can work together for the sake of human or women needs? Thank you.
And now we have Mitish from India, who has a question for all the men here.
Hi, everyone. If all the men here can close their eyes for 20 seconds, please. And imagine your mother giving you 3 meals a day on time without a frown. Imagine your sister being forced not to go for higher education, not because she's not capable, but because she's a woman, or her brother has to go for studies, which is more important. Or your working wife, who is not only balancing her work and home, but also taking care of you, your children, and everyone, against men who only manage their work, but still crib about it. So I have this question for all the men here, and also around the globe. When we know all this, then why there is gender inequality? Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have to race now, okay? We can do 2 on each mic only, and you've got 30 seconds each. So 2, 2, 2, 2, and you're out. Christine.
Arida from Pakistan.
I have a question from Ms. Fatima Bhutto, because you both hail from Pakistan. Ms. Fatima, your family has suffered and sacrificed itself for human rights. Your aunt, Benazir Bhutto, was murdered, and even during her life, she was opposed and maligned for being the youngest female Prime Minister of Pakistan. Please tell us, based on your personal experience, what is the major hurdle for the world to achieve 100% women rights despite decades of struggle? Why is it that the world is moving fast at a low speed for women rights? Thank you.
Thank you. Bob, Caroline?
Muzna from Sudan on education.
Hi, everyone. My name is Muzna Samaddin, an architect and a human rights activist from Sudan. I'm one of the Education Without Borders volunteers. Our aim is to enhance the education environment in very disadvantaged regions of Sudan. But I think it's about time we highlight the issue of women and girls' education. Because when it comes to education, girls are marginalized. So my question is, how can you promote women and girls' education in a community that does not support the gender equality?
Thank you. Maya.
This is Labour from South Africa. She runs a 24-hour emergency unit.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my question very brief. As already mentioned, I run a 24-hour crisis center as part of victim empowerment here in South Africa. And one of the successes that we have in South Africa is that we've been able to establish 2 Tuzela care centers, one-stop shelters throughout the country. But the first challenge is that within those one-stop centers, we do not have sign language interpreters. So if you have a victim that has been abused and is unable to express themselves verbally, they are then subjected to secondary victimization. I have tried to write letters and make recommendations, and I haven't been successful. I'm seeking out support and help to do that. And secondly, our advocacy programs and the promotional materials which we print out, such as the Victims Charter and the norms and standards of victim empowerment, they are also not made for blind people. So if we can also develop them in Braille so that they can also know as to where to go for information. Thank you.
Thank you. Fatty, with you.
Yeah. Silav here is going to ask a question from a delegate who couldn't be here. Emir.
Yes. Amir's question is, how can we make our community that is a religious-based community accept diversity? What are possible ways to create a place where where you can be accepted regardless of who you are?
Thank you, Fatty. Christine, last one with you.
Yes, from Bangladesh, Mokhtuma.
Hello, my name is Mokhtuma and I'm from Bangladesh. It was great to listen to all of you, especially Amanda. I have something common with you. Like, since last year, I have started to celebrate my birthday in October. I was not born in October, but back in 2011, I was just this little away from getting killed by my then husband. It was a short-lived marriage, so full of different type of violence. I myself is a lawyer working for International Organization for Migration, and I had no clue what type of sexual violence or what type of psychological or what type of financial and physical violence I was going through. But I'm glad that my parents, despite I come from this conservative family and from a very conservative society, they supported me and they educated me. That was really important, that I realized that my life is more important than my marriage, and there's no point of giving up. I started... I'm sorry, I might take a few seconds more. I was almost dying. I didn't know what to do. I was just trying to save my marriage because I come from this society where a divorced woman is apparently considered as a second-hand product. I'm sorry to use this word, but I am considered that way. I am officially banned to go to some of my relatives' place because I divorced my husband. I raised my voice against the domestic violence I was going through. It's just a small request to all the people here. I mean, it's such a coincidence that 2 years back in October, I was about to die, and after 2 years, I'm here at One Young World. I just want to request all of you, just raise your voice against all sorts of violence against women, and for that purpose, you don't have to run a charity or NGO.
Thank you.
You can do from your own place.
Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. Bob and Caroline, last one with you. Christine. Christine?
Last question, and if we have the councillors back to the stage,
Okay,
please.
Melina, she's from Serbia. And Kate, I wanted to say on the amazing question from the gentleman from South Africa, I would like to help. I'd like to help.
Fabulous. Thank you, Caroline.
Hello. I'm Milena from Serbia on behalf of Exit Festival, which started as democracy movement against the totalitarian regime in the Balkans and evolved into one of the best European music and activism festivals. And I would like to invite all of you, One Young World friends and Sir Geldof, for a reunion in July 2014, when you can present your activities at the Exit's 14th birthday. War and brain drain shaped my existence and led me to Cambridge degree and having 2,000 change makers from Serbian diaspora and this beautiful platform in my network. Therefore, my question is, how do we approach our government leaders to listen to us as we are not a threat to their chairs, but have sustainable solutions to education and business erosion? And how do we empower unemployed peers to start their business instead of resorting to complaining and inaction? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so councillors, what an amazing session. Would each of you like to comment, maybe answer a question that was asked or comment on something you heard? Fatima, do you want to start?
I was only asked one question, which is why is the world moving at such a slow pace? I think the answer speaks to what Bob said last night. Because we don't practice the politics of compassion. We talk a lot about equality and we talk a lot about things like that, but there's a hierarchy in equality. We are equal, we are not equal, you are the same, you are different. You can't do that with compassion. You are either compassionate to everybody or you are not. You don't get to choose. And I think that's what we have to do, and I hope here, when we talk about women, we're talking about ourselves, we're talking about the men here, we're talking about everyone. Let's be more human, as Bob said.
I must say that I've been very, very touched by the courage that everyone who has spoken and the things that they have spoken about. It takes a lot of courage to speak about things that have affected their lives, and I really thank them for that and sharing in that. I'd also like to say that I've met two young men in the audience that wanted to come and speak, but they had two interesting points of view that they feel have not been raised, and I agree with them. One of them is, how can men help women's rights without feeling guilty themselves? And women's rights have become very, very important now, and people do talk about them. And men are almost often criticized for not helping, and they often don't help, but there are men who do, and those should be celebrated. And secondly, about rape towards men. And men do get raped, and that is a very big taboo in our society, and that is something that should also be talked about and found solutions to protecting them and finding ways in which they can express themselves and creating groups in which they can do that. So I'd urge people to engage in that level as well.
What has really struck me throughout this session is the anger. I think we all feel terribly angry. And all these extraordinary women, not only those on stage, but those in the room amongst you, who've had the courage to express their anger against their own societies, against their own communities, and also the anger of some of these young men in the audience. Because, as you say, they shouldn't feel guilty. They want to take part. And I think that anger is really what gets us all going. And that is why I think, Kate and David, it was such a great idea to bring this session and give it this amount of time. Thank you.
I want to pick up from where Maya left off on the gentleman. Two things. First, lesson I learned about 2 years ago working with a Maasai in northern Kenya. If you don't put the gentleman in the room when you're having the conversation, they don't know, first, what the problem is and where it is. So if you've heard anything about Kenya, when you see the Maasai, you think, well, they're still herders and they're pastoralists, and, you know, they probably are still in 1952. They're not. By and large, most of the progress made in issues of gender violence, in the issues of female circumcision, we've had the most gains in the Maasai community for one reason and one reason only, that the men are part of the conversation. You do not have the conversation without them in the room. Because there's no point of having a conversation with a woman in one room and still sending her back home into resistance, and not because the gentlemen don't want to meet you halfway, it's just that they've no clue what's going on. The other thing we've done in Kenya, and which is why I said I want to help, is that we do have something like Sister Somalia. It's called the Gender Violence Recovery Center. It's barely 10 years old. And what we do is we do provide free help, but obviously it is funded by charity. And when we finally had to look for patrons and faces for the GVRC, we took our own Sevens rugby team. So the Kenyan Sevens team isn't just fantastic at a rugby, but they are the faces and voices of gender violence. Not just because it's a female issue, but also it's a male issue. And they do all the communication. Every time we have to do commercials, they voice them. They do all our billboards. They've barely been doing this for 3 years, and this is how you get the guys in. Because we had to find the biggest, strongest, toughest guys in town to have the conversation. And 2 years ago, we launched the Million Fathers and Daughters. So we get fathers who are prominent in society to talk about why the women in their lives are important and should be protected. We just barely got started, and I'm hoping once again I hear it when the men say, involve us. And I will make sure Kate gets our material and passes it around. That's what we're doing.
Fabulous. Bob.
There's three things I want to say. First, I want to address the Serbian woman who made the key point. She said, we're not a threat to our governments, so how do we enact change? Well, be a threat, because they will do nothing until you threaten them. And the way you do that, of course, politics is numbers. You put a pound in a charity box because you see a hurt human, and you want to extend the hand of shared humanity and say, not in my name. The most that most people can do is to put their hand in their pocket, and God knows they don't have much money to spend these days, but they put the euro or the dollar or the whatever into the box. But when 1 million people put the dollar in the box, then the politics begins to shift. So, as I constantly say year after year, when there is an issue clearly to the fore of society and in your consciousness and in your activism, as there is clearly present now, you must agree, if this thing is to work at all, this thing that Kate and David do is a huge experiment. I hate the young bit, because it doesn't make any difference what age you are. You've just decided to engage. That's the first turn of the key. But when you leave here, every one of you have got the ability to constantly talk now to each other. You share an attitude and a target, that things that are wrong will change. And as I said last night, things may not get better, but that shouldn't stop you trying to make it better. And that the worst of progress is not that it is an illusion, is that it is endless. Because the moment one plateau has been arrived at, another looms up. And so society must constantly test itself. But with these machines we have, that society is represented here, and the extraordinary number of individuals from each country sharing one objective. So be a threat. Go home, gather the numbers. When authority fails to respond, it is your responsibility to challenge authority. You must do that, or else all of this is a waste of time, and you become the authority then. You control and write the agenda and enforce it. This thing that is happening towards women must be stopped. Out of self-interest alone, we cannot continue with it. Now, the second part. Why is it happening? It has probably happened throughout millennia. It's probably happened originally for fairly okay reasons. The physically dominant partner controlled the domestic agenda. Possibly that was the beginning. Who knows? I'm not an anthropologist. But what's happening now in the world economy is a severe threat to the notion of being a man. Because specifically, young males fight for status. In the West, it's, do I have a better car than the other guy? Is it cooler? Is it neater? Or do I have the latest technology, the latest whiz-bang thing? And with that, they can lay their tributes at the woman's door and she can select her partner. It's all very primitive stuff, this. Where you have nothing, where you are mute, where you have no elective representatives, then you pick up a stone or an AK-47 and you shoot for it. And you can see this in the bell curve of young males around the world. Right now, there's a disproportion of young males in the Middle East. But because of the one-child policy in China, that bell curve is moving rapidly towards the east. And when it does arrive in China, when those males reach the age where they have to fight for their status and be recognized, then there'll be trouble. As we see in the Middle East, it is one of the causes of it. If you have 40% of the unemployed being young men loitering around street corners, it is exceptionally dangerous. And I doubt many would argue that it's more dangerous to have 40% of young women loitering on street corners. And so the government of this country is going hell-bent to try and bring employment to specifically the youth, of course, of this country, but specifically to the young males. But if they don't have a job, if they can't get status, who are they in this world? What are they? They can't find a mate, and they can't provide for that mate should they find one. So what is a man? What does he do? If his life is constantly frustrated in his genetic imperative, where does he stand? And the madness of some of us is that he will take it out on the person closest to him, or to women in general. The final point I want to make is I was dismayed when you clapped because Amanda was working at Google. Who fucking cares? Google is a giant multinational corporation that exists to make a few people even richer. And what they did was invent a cute bit of technology, excellent, brilliant, and it enables us to function in the modern world, but it's no different to Carnegie or Morgan or Ford. Sergey and Larry, good guys. Zuckerman, great guy. But it's just a company. That's it. And to this end, go on Google and look at the figures for porn. Accessible to everyone. And the preponderance of figures for porns by a vast majority are the men of the world. And there it is, and each site has a preponderance of violence towards women, sexual violence, humiliation. And when you have women creating the publishing phenomenon of our time, the unreadable piece of crap that is 50 Shades of Shit, where it's cute, in effect, to mildly beat up girls, and that's what they really want. All the girls love it, don't they? They all want to be beaten up, spanked and thing. So in this confusion, that women write this stuff, that women are turning on to this porn as a game. It's not a game. It ends up with Amanda not working in Google, but being thrown over a cliff, running naked for miles. It ends up with the woman from Bangladesh, whose husband thought it was cool, it's fine. I beat the crap out of her. Hey, they're writing books about it these days. Go with the flow. There's a core sickness at the heart of this. We seem to have forgotten what men and women are meant to be and what they're meant to do together. And we need to get at the bottom of that. And again, it goes to politics, and again, it goes to economics. And if you leave this uniquely important session and arrive in Dublin next year, my hometown, I'd love you guys to have spent the year working on this together, really together. This cube thing is cute, where you just pass it around, but more than that, Keep on the phone, keep on the net, keep talking. And where the authorities will not listen to you, you get a lobby together and you make them listen. You just shout louder, more consistently, and engage thoroughly, fully, and completely. And they will succumb. You will win. Just one thing, Amanda, you should go to Sergey and Larry. And you've got to, seriously, I'm really serious about this. Is a vital debate now, particularly in the UK, which is why it was in my head. The government and the opposition are saying, how the hell, we don't want to bring in censorship, but how do we limit this so that our children are not brought up with this warped sense of what it is to be human? You've got to try that within the company. Say, can we come up? You must come up with some clever algorithms that can, you know, do it. I mean, get on with it, for fuck's sake.
So, talking of clever algorithms, we're just going to do 3 very quick questions that we want you to vote on. So the first one, if you can get your voting devices out, and then we will thank the councillors and move to a break. Firstly, gender equality is the #1 global human rights issue. If you could vote now, please. Interesting. It'd be interesting to know the disagrees what they believe the #1 is. Second question, governments should publicise the commitments and agreements they've made in terms of gender equality. Could you vote on that now, please?
Oh.
Excellent. And finally, government should formally engage with young people to assess progress towards gender equality commitments.
Let's go to the next vote on Bob's question. Should Google a big search engine? Why not?
94% agree. And they all add up to 100% now. We're getting better at the maths as the day goes on. So listen, a huge thank you for our amazing councillors. Give them a big round of applause. Woo! An even bigger round of applause for our amazing speakers. We're now taking a short break. We have